Good morning, everyone. So today we will be discussing the compilation process and regulation on how to prepare financial statement. Okay. So many of us still in the process and wondering why there is a need of financial statement. It is vital. If it's important, how can I make financial statement in an effective and efficient manner? So most of us actually or during our survey, ito yung mostly tanong, the process or um, papaano gagawin ng madali yung financial statement. Actually, preparing financial statement is not easy. Okay. So yun yung totoo. So it's not easy, but there is a process. There is a process on preparing financial statement. And in order for us to be effective and efficient in preparing financial statement, we will be tackling series of discussion. So first of course, we have to understand the need of financial statement and its applicable accounting framework. Included also in this series is you will know what is the important or what are the information needed for a good and strong financial statement. And lastly, this session will help you where and how to start as well as how to complete the financial statement. I hope this series of discussion will help you or help you answer all your questions in relation to preparation. So, okay, let's start. So, what is financial statement? So, financial statement is a structured financial representation of entities' financial position and undertaken transactions. It is used for making economic decisions and shows the management's stewardship on the resources entrusted to it. Some businesses see the importance of financial statement because it's a statutory requirement for most of the countries, 'di ba? Tama naman. So, but we should understand that financial analysis and reporting are not just statutory requirement. Okay? Clear naman ako, sorry. Naririnig ba ako ng maayos? Ah, I assume yes. So, but we have to understand financial analysis and reporting are not just statutory requirement. It is one of the bedrock for modern business, and it has an untapped power and potential. Okay. So in speaking of power and potential, we have to unlock factors. So we have to unlock factors or consideration in order for us to have a successful financial statement. I'll just mention some, but it's not limited in this success factors. Okay. So first is the financial closing process. Financial closing process is an activity that closes the books, which includes correction of error, making or make specific adjustment on error before the preparation of financial statement. We all know this as client adjustment or proposed adjusting entry by the auditors. So next is the relevant information. Timely information is important to have a real-time data and information for business decision and for stakeholders assessment. Alam naman natin na importante yung relevant information. Of course, aside from relevant information, we should have a reliable system. It is vital to have and ensure that our system is appropriate based on the industry. Unreliable system can lead to ineffectiveness and efficiency, especially if there's a specialized industry and they don't use a reliable system. It will bring chaos to the industry and it will not be efficient and effective in terms of making economic decisions for the management. Next is, of course, we should know the appropriate framework that we have to use or we should use in every financial statement. And lastly, we should know what are the appropriate rules and understand the importance of disclosing it to the financial statement. So remember that financial statement is the window of the company. It should speak for itself. And syempre, diba, the management, accounting, and even the board of directors cannot be attached in the FS all the time. Kahit kapag sined mo na ito or dinala mo na ito sa statutory or sa BIR and SEC, you cannot attach accounting, management, and even the board of director to answer the queries of the statutory. So what are the relevant information provided in the financial statement? Of course, we have assets. Assets are the items or value that business owns. So asset can range from cash, raw materials, and stocks, office equipment, building, and intellectual property. Next is the liability. Liability is an obligation arising from past business transaction or events that is not yet settled. Liability mostly or usually accounts payable, business accounts payable from business operations, short-term and long-term loan, and pension liability. And also we have equity. This is the difference between the asset and liability. We also have, syempre, nandyan yung income and expense. It shows the company's performance during the period. And lastly, we have cash flows. Cash flow shows the company's cash or where the company's cash came from and where it's being used. Cash flow composed of three main activity, which is the operating, investing, financing, which we'll be discussing later in the later slide. So yun. Now we will talk about the accounting framework applicable for every company. So since we already know yung importance or information relevant to the financial statement, now let's talk about yung accounting framework naman. So accounting framework or framework will depend on the company and its complexity. So for example, there is a company or company registered in the CDA, like the Corporate Development Authority. Of course, this is a separate framework that you should use a GAAP or cooperative. So most of the cooperative use the GAAP instead of the actual framework that we use. For those naman that has a less than 3 million liability at asset, they use income tax basis or PAS 101. This is the cash basis accounting, but it basically came from tax basis. So kung ano yung income tax basis or income tax base, yun yung figures na gagamitin mo for sending or preparing the financial statement. But for the companies with total asset and liability is from 300 million and 3 million up to 100 million, it is required for them to adopt the PFRS for small entities. So however, they have an option to adopt the PFRS for SME if yun yung preference nila. I'm sorry, it is SME. So I think I should correct this one. So I hope I should correct this one. It should be SME, sorry. So ayun. So if nag-exceed sa 100 million yung asset and liability of a company, PFRS for SME should be adopted. Also, any company with less than 100 350 M in asset and 250 M in liability and not a publicly accountable entities are required to adopt the PFRS for SME. But they also have an option to go for PFRS for full PFRS. So any amount that exceeds the threshold of 350 and 250 M should adopt the full PFRS. And of course, yung mga publicly accountable companies, yung mga listed companies are required to adopt full PFRS, or anyone or any company that opted to do the full PFRS, okay? You can further revisit this accounting framework or basis in SEC website, SEC memorandum. Take note of the SEC memorandum 5-2018. So you can save it already so you have a reference. Since we already discussed this, the initial information regarding the financial statement at a higher glance, let us now go to its component. So there is this is a very common question and everyone, especially in the session, should know the components of a complete set of financial statement, right? Okay. So in a complete set of financial statement, we have statement of financial position, comprehensive income, changes in equity, cash flow, notes, and of course, the third balance sheet. Okay. So statement of financial position. In this area, we will see the asset, liability, equity of the company. As well as in statement of comprehensive income naman, on the other hand, this shows the revenue expenses during the period. And in equity, this details the movement of the company's capital as well as its retained earnings. So yung cash flow, I think we've already discussed it a while ago regarding the cash in and out or cash used and provided in the company. So notes to financial statement, this area will briefly explain in detail all companies' information, representation, policies, and disclosures. And in this area also, the notes to financial statement, ito yung most consumed area within the financial statement. So, what is the required statement for each framework? Siyempre, lahat. So, itong lahat na to is kailangan for each of the framework for full PFRS, whether it's full SME or small entities, it is required. But how about the third balance sheet? For SME and small entity, it is not required, but for full PFRS under FAS 1.40A, a third balance sheet position is required to be presented if the entity retrospectively applies an accounting policy. That's the number one. Number two, if it's restate items or reclassify items, and they have adjustment that had material effect on the financial statement. And those effects came from the beginning of the comparative period. So if the adjustment came from the beginning of the comparative period, which is when we say comparative figure, it is the year. For example, now we're using the 2020 as a current period. The comparative period is 2019, and its beginning comparative period is ending of 2018. Okay, you get it? So when we say beginning of the comparative figure, it's the other year from the comparative figure or beginning of the comparative. So ending na nung isa pang taon. Okay? Please also take note, not like in full PFRS, in PFRS for SME and equity, this two, if the only changes to equity arise from either profit or loss, payment of dividends, correction of error, and changes of accounting policy, an entity may present a single combined statement of income and retained earning instead of a separate statement. So the management has an option to present it on a single statement instead of a separate statement for comprehensive income and equity. Okay? So regardless of the framework, there should have at the minimum of 5 statements for a complete set of financial statement. So remember, always 5. Always 5 set of statement. I'm sorry. 5 set of statement. So we have here also another difference. This is another difference on other income naman, other comprehensive income. So for other comprehensive income, we have, for SME, we only have 3, take note, we only have 3 OCI items under SME. This is the first is the foreign currency translation. As already, I think some of these are already discussed or most of these are already discussed yesterday. So we just make some recap. So foreign currency translation, this is a difference between the company's functional currency and presentation currency. So sample, if the company is operating under Philippine environment, hence they are reporting under yen currency, PH currency is their functional currency while yen is the presentation currency. The difference will be directed to OCI. Okay? So yes, next is the hedging instrument. So hedging instrument naman as per section 12 of PFRS for SME, if the company is involved in a high-risk financial instrument which comprise of different kind of interest rate risk, so which includes like commodities, for example, debts, forex, and other instrument which is highly volatile. So changes from this instrument should be directed to OCI instead of PNL. Always remember this item. Next is the actuarial gains and losses. So this is another adjustment. Take note that this is another adjustment aside from the one that we are adjusting in the PNL, the retirement expense or pension expense. Actuarial gains or losses should came from a third party or independent valuer, which is the actuary. The assessment that they will arrive should be directed to OCI, not in the PNL. There's a separate amount that you should adjust in the PNL, not the actual, but for the actuarial, the findings for the actuarial should be adjusted in the OCI. Okay. This 3 OCI item is also part of the OCI adjustment in full PFRS. So let's go now to full PFRS. So for full PFRS, we have ilan? 6, right? So 6 yung OCI adjustment natin for full PFRS. So first is the revaluation surplus. So we all know this. The revaluation surplus is the difference from the net book value and the fair value of the asset if there are class of assets that are being revalued. So the difference should directed to OCI. And for the other two, based on IFRS 9, I think it was already discussed yesterday. The all of uh the gains and losses kasi from remeasurement and credit risk financial liability is will depend on the business model and other factors and consideration in measuring and identifying the financial instrument. So any FVOCI adjustment should go to OCI, of course, the other comprehensive income. So next slide. So I think it's clear. Just take note of this six since these are the items that you will encounter later on in analyzing the transaction of the company. So if you pag may nahagip kayo mga ganitong transaction, you already know saan siya ilalagay. Most of the some of the medium and small entities kasi are not so familiar in other comprehensive income, so you'll be the one to suggest that it should be on the bottom, not on the part of the P&L. So now we will be discussing the third part, the steps on preparing financial statements. So before that, we have to know where to start. So part of our discussion earlier is the closing process. Yet, yes, it is important because it is the first, actually first area that we need to settle in the FS process or financial statement process. Closing is need to be finalized so that trial balance and figures in the financial statement will be final. Once trial balance is final, we can go to the disclosures gathering to ensure appropriate information are indicated, or we can disclose the appropriate information in the financial statement. When this process are complete, that's the only time we will do the drafting and review of the financial statement. So asan pa lang tayo? Nasa closing pa lang tayo kanina, 'di ba? So now we will go to the trial balance. So once closing is finished, we need to set up our trial balance. So what is working trial balance? Remember that company or the management and us, the auditors or the auditors and accounting should have their own working trial balance. But the working trial balance is a trial balance that is process of being adjusted. So this is the example of working trial balance. In this concept, it is an adjusted trial balance, as you can see. Then these are the adjustments. These additional entries are entered in the general ledger to complete a trial balance. Okay, so what are the important information that we should include in a working trial balance? So as you can see here, we have the account details. This accounts detail should be the same, or dapat tama siya doon sa system or doon sa books ng client din natin if we are the auditor. Or if we're the accountant, it should be same with the system that we use. Okay. Next, of course, we have the mapping, the account mapping. So we should also put the account mapping. This is an example of account mapping. We have per balance sheet, per income, and for FS notes tagging. So this is to ensure na accurate yung amount, or this accounts tagging is also very important in preparing the financial statement as a whole, or the amounts in the financial statement. Okay. So, and here are your prior year audit balances. So, remember that um, we should have a column for unadjusted balances, a column for kahe, pahe, and if there is a reclass, we can add additional or reclassification amounts. We can add an additional column for that. Once adjustment or client adjusting entry is done, that is the time we can already call the balances as adjusted. So after naman magkaroon or matapos yung kahe and reclassification, that is the time we can do or we can use the audited balances. Okay. Make sure also that prior year balances is always present to ensure that you can see the comparative figure of the balances of of the the each account. Okay? So katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, account mapping is important for us to easily pivot account when we need to display balance sheet, income statement, income statement and notes to financial statement. Katulad nito. So as you can see, para na siyang financial statement talaga. And it's composed of those accounts or BS accounts. So we can do the same for income statement also and changes in equity. Okay. So in the basic financial statement preparation, we have three process. So first is the trial balance, which we already discussed a while ago. And please take note of the following activities within the trial balance to ensure that reliable information are gathered and be used. Next is the financial position. In this process, we should ensure that financial position, comprehensive income, cash flow, and changes in equity is available. Actually, for the three items, except for cash flow, as I said earlier, if we've done properly the trial balance activity, the mapping of account, analysis of transaction, classifying of account balances, aggregation and adjustment of balances, we will be having no problem in terms of financial statement or financial statement balances, except for cash flow, of course. And last, the notes to financial statements, which includes framework, identification, representation, and disclosure of accounts balances, as well as performing the process within applicable statutory requirements such as SEC Rule 68 or other memorandum circular, and of course BAR regulations or bulletin. So expect that we will detail this later, this basic preparation process. So next is, aside from basic preparation process, it is important for us to know the financial information and sources in order to complete the process, especially the notes to financial statements. In these slides these are not all inclusive, but here are some informations and sources that we need to get into or look into in order for us uh, to have a good and strong financial statement. Okay. For financial information, of course, we have these items. And for sources, ayan, this is very important for all the sources. So since we will be needing this for the disclosures. So are you ready for the financial statement preparation? Okay. Let's first be familiarized muna on the what you will see on the financial statement. Okay. So this is the ano ba to? Hindi ko masyadong excuse me po. Wait lang po Ayun. Yan. So this is the FS of Mobile Legends International Corporation. This is the sample statement from formerly Hunger Games. So what are the important information that we should be or that should be present on all statement? Reminder, I just show here the balance sheet, but it's generally applies to all statement, okay? So first, we have heading. So in our heading, as you can see, we have the name of the entity. Okay. So in the name of the entity, ayan, the name of the entity should be exact appear on the legal document. So it should be very specific in terms of spelling. If on the legal document it says corp, you should input corp, not corporation. Okay. Next is, of course, if there's a change in entity's name, the change in entity's name should be present since the end of the preceding period. Okay? So like yung example dito, we've shown this formerly Hunger Games. So we can show it at least hanggang end ng preceding period. Okay? Next is, if it is a wholly owned subsidiary or branch, we should indicate it. Also, if it's consolidated reporting under a group, we should include it, also indicate in the heading. Okay, next. What are the other information pa that we need in the heading? Of course, we have here the um, currency representation, the amounts in peso, Philippine pesos, and of course, the rounding off if there is. If halimbawa the amount is in million or in thousand, we have to indicate in the heading. Okay. Next is the reporting period. So the reporting period, we have to know when we will use the year or period. So as of or year of period, when we will use the as of and when we will use the year or period. So in as of, we will use it for the information which is cumulative. Cumulative like statement of financial position. Since the statement or figures in the statement of financial position is cumulative figures. Year or period naman if specific period, for specific period. So the example of those are SEI, SCE, and SEF. The Statement of Comprehensive Income, Changes in Equity, and Cash Flows. But for the year or for the period, kailan natin gagamitin ang for the year and kailan natin gagamitin ang for the period? Di ba? Ang dami pa. So we have to be specific in those. For the year or period, we will use the year if it is a 1 year of operation. Take note that it should be the both current and prior year were full operation. We will only use period if there is a less than 1 year. So if there's a cut, for example, 6-month period lang yung current year dahil nag-change sila ng accounting period, we should use period instead of year. Okay? I hope it's clear. Current year is, so ito pa yung isa, if the current year is full year and last year were not, for example, the last year, we will use the period instead of year. Okay? I hope hindi kayo malito dito sa mga as of, for the year, and for the period. So, ayan. We also have the note references for user or for readers guidance. So it is also important to include in the face of the financial statement. Account balances or account and its related balances. Okay. And also the footnotes. Maybe you will, siguro nagtatanong kayo why it is really important. Later, on the rules and regulation in terms of the regulatory body as like SEC, we can discuss this further. Why it is really important to put this on the notes or in the face of the financial statement. So comparative balance, there are take note that the presumption is financial statement will be prepared at least annually, or if it's the annual reporting changes, there should always have a disclosure. So if the comparative figure is not comparative, or the two periods are not comparative, we should disclose the reason for why it is not comparative, and if there is a changes, which we should also include in the financial statement or the disclosure, the changes if there is. So of course, consistency in the account groupings and mapping should be consistent or prominent during on a year-to-year basis. When in case there is a retrospective adjustment or retrospective restatement of the items in the financial statement, and there is a reclassification made, it must also present in the financial statement. And we should prepare, of course, yung like yung sinabi ko kanina, the third balance sheet if needed. So let's go now to steps in preparing financial statement. So what should we do first, or what should we do first in preparing financial statements? So here are the steps on preparing financial statement. So maybe you're confused bakit SCI yung nasa first step, but later you will realize why it is important to start on the SCI rather than on the financial state or the financial position. Okay? So let's go to step 1 na. Okay? Okay. So in this statement, the statement of comprehensive income, this shown of course, the result of performance of the companies for a specific period. Okay. We have the revenues and income and expenses. The item that will be recycled to profits or loss are the one that I discussed earlier in relation to OCI to come up with the statement of comprehensive income. Okay. So actually the standard has an option, or all of the management, and of course yung nagpe-prepare ng financial statement has an option to do a single statement or two statement approach in preparing the financial statement. So ano yung itsura ng single statement at two statement approach? So single statement approach, ito yung itsura niya. So the single statement approach is the revenue less expenses, and the subtotal should always be profit or loss. Take note that if you do a single statement approach, profit or loss must be the subtotal. Laging ganito. And yan, that is the time you will add the other comprehensive income to come up with the total comprehensive income. Unlike in the two statement approach, you have one statement for statement of profit or loss, and that shows the bottom line of profit or loss. So ibig sabihin, ang bottom line is parang siya yung nandito sa pinakababa, the profit or loss. And you have another statement for other comprehensive income, which begins from profit or loss. Okay? Okay, to further understand this, sige. This is the example of a single statement approach. Ayan. So as you can see, we have here the revenue, cost, gen add, finance cost, other expenses. Ayan. Take note that if there is a account that represents net, put net on the face of the financial statement. Yeah. Okay. At a minimum, we should disclose this, or we should show in the financial statement the revenue, the cost and expenses, of course, finance costs, general and admin, and tax expenses. Yun yung at a minimum requirement na dapat naka-face sa financial statement as per IAS 1, the presentation on the financial statement. Okay. So take note also that no item should be labeled as extraordinary. Okay. Kahit sa notes to financial statement, there shouldn't be an item that is labeled as extraordinary. I hope everyone get it. Okay. So this is the next slide naman shows the two statement approach. So as you can see here, so profit or loss for the year, and we have another statement which begins with the profit for the year, or deduct the item, recycle to profit or loss, and you will shown here the ending. Also take note if the items in the other comprehensive income are already net of tax, include the word net of tax for readers' understanding, and also for assessment if ever may andyan na rin yung BIR and SEC to review your financial statement. Okay. Total comprehensive income. For those clients with that has NCI, so if you're familiar with the non-controlling interest, for the non-controlling interest should be here on the bottom after the other comprehensive income. So the items or the amount related to non-controlling interest or non-controlling interest items should be below here. And after the non-controlling, syempre, yun na yung attributable, attributable to parents and owners. the grand total at the bottom. Okay. So this is the actual example of a statement of comprehensive income or loss. As you can see on the previous slide, what's missing on the previous slide, as except from this, what's missing? The notes to financial statements or the footnotes, right? So always take note or always remember that we should always put these notes in the financial statement. So yeah. So next. So key points in preparing statement of financial position. So ensure reminder that headings and subtotals are important for stakeholders understanding and indicate net for all account balances applicable. Of course, lastly, make sure that provision of income tax and OCI have individual component in the statements. Okay, always take note of that, of these key points in preparing the financial statement. So, ayan. Um, so, and I hope, so yun yung process for statement of comprehensive income. So, simple lang, di ba? So, in this process, we ensure that, kindly ensure that we gathered or needed information, prepare necessary headings and reports, report all revenues and expenses, compute for the profit or loss, and as well as the OCI items. So these are the guidelines. So you should first go here, papunta dito to come up or to make a statement of comprehensive income. Okay. I hope everyone get it. Is gross profit required in the presentation in the face of the statement of comprehensive income? Actually, the answer is no. Hindi siya required. The expenses can say may be presented either by nature or by function. As we remember in our um, college days, nature, we have an expense by nature or by function, and we can use it in the face of comprehensive income. So, gross profit is not required in the presentation of financial statement. Okay. So, let's just go back on the presentation here a while ago regarding um, the statement of comprehensive loss or comprehensive income. When we will use the statement of comprehensive loss, comprehensive income, comprehensive statement of profit or loss, okay lang ba na profit or loss lang yung gamitin? For example, statement of profit or loss. Yes, okay lang na statement of profit or loss ang gamitin natin if the statement or the bottom line that we will use, make sure lang na it is consistent. Statement of loss yung gagamitin natin if both comparative figure are loss. If income naman yung last year, of course, we have to slash it, then use the income or extend it to comprehensive loss or income. Okay? So take note of that. Hindi naman required na talagang statement of comprehensive yung gagamitan mo. You can use comprehensive income anytime or tsaka even if yung lalo na kapag meron kang other comprehensive income items, you can use a comprehensive word. But you can use also the profit or loss lang na word statement of profit or loss if wala ka namang other comprehensive income. If naman or kailan mo pwedeng gamitin yung income? So profit or loss or income statement or comprehensive income kapag both years are income naman, and if the other year naman is loss, you should extend income/loss. Okay? So clear tayo doon sa top, doon sa title ng report. As long as it is consistent on the rest of the financial statement, it's okay. Walang magiging problema. So next step, changes in equity. So nasa step 2 na tayo. So how to compute statement of changes in equity? So here are the this is the example of a changes in equity or changes in capital deficiency based on the statement. So we have here, of course, as you can see, we have here the total comprehensive. We have here the beginning balances, of course, and the movement. In computation or presenting this in the statement of capital deficiency or equity, we should include the total comprehensive income, owner's investments and withdrawal if there's any, dividends and treasury share transactions if there's any. So we should include it in the movement or in the middle after before the beginning or the balances as at end of the year. So take note when retained earnings becomes negative, as you can see, use term deficit or accumulated loss instead of retained earnings. Kapag naman deficit exceeds already on the capital, as you can see here, use the term capital deficiency instead of equity. So change the heading from statement of retained earnings or changes in equity to statement of capital deficiency. And it should always shown consistently on the rest of the statement. Okay. So now we have the three statement. So amount and balances should tie up with the balances in the financial position and comprehensive income. Take note of this. The statement of changes in capital or deficient capital or equity should tie it up with the statement of comprehensive loss and financial position. So let's begin with the tying up. So beginning, share capital at the beginning of the year should be equal to the share capital on the statement of financial position, in the statement of financial position, as you can see there. Next is the ending capital deficiency as at beginning of the year should be equal to the ending capital deficiency at the end of the comparative figure or year. Okay. So next is comprehensive loss for the year should be equal to the loss representing in the statement of comprehensive loss. And total deficit at the end of the year should be equal to the deficit declared in the financial statement. Lastly, the ending capital deficiency should be equal or tied up to the capital deficiency in the financial position. So when doing the statement of changes in equity, we should always consider this figure and cross-refer it to statement of comprehensive loss and statement of financial position. Also ensure that the account name are exactly the same. If you use deficit here, you should use deficit here. Or if you use accumulated loss here, in the financial position, dapat accumulated loss din siya. Okay? And of course, for SEI, net loss representing total comprehensive loss for the year, dapat same din siya ng word by word on the statement of changes in equity. Okay? So, yun yung mga rules na kailangan nating tandaan when we do the changes in equity or capital deficiency. So, in this process, preparing of changes in equity or capital deficiency, we have to ensure that we gathered all, of course, the needed information, prepare necessary heading, report capital and retained earnings beginning, and identify all the movement within the share capital as well as in the retained earnings and accumulated losses to come up or for us to have an ending balance or capital deficiency. So let's quickly define the current and non-current classification. When an account is considered as current, an account, whether asset or liability, is considered as current if it is within the normal or realize the entity in a normal operating cycle. Second is held primarily for purpose of trading and expected to be realized within the 12 months after the reporting period. Other consideration also, if all cash and cash equivalents are considered as current unless it is restricted. And for liability, if the entity that does not have an unconditional right to defer or settle the payment within 12 months, it should be tagged as current. So when we say does not have unconditional right to defer, ano yung ibig sabihin lang? What's the meaning of that? So when we say does not have an unconditional right to defer, ibig sabihin walang uh, walang walang right si company na hindi kailangan yon. For example, if the loan is payable on demand and hindi natin alam kung kailan kung kailan mangongolekta yung yung bangko and payable na siya on demand, we should tag it as current. Take note also that all other or lahat ng hindi kasama dito sa definition ng current should be tagged as non-current na, as well as all deferred taxes, whether it is asset or liability, it is never classified as current. In process of preparing financial position, we have to ensure that we gather the needed information, prepare necessary headings for the report, and report all companies' asset, liability, and equity balances indicated and indicate the required footnotes and prepare notes to financial statements. So yun. But before we go to the notes to financial statement, we have to first go to the statement of cash flows on our step 5. So statement of cash flow. Fundamentally, the statement of cash flow analyzes changes in cash and cash equivalent during the period. This actually the standard requires the presentation of statement of cash flow in a manner that distinguish the operation, investing, financing activities accordingly. The operating activities, of course, are the main revenue producing activity of the entity that are not investing or financing. So um, operating cash flows include mostly the cash received from customers and cash paid to suppliers and employees. The investing, on the other hand, is the acquisition and disposal of long-term assets and other investment that are not considered as cash equivalents. In the financing activity naman, these are the activity that alters equity, borrowing, and structure of the entity. So to identify it quickly, there's a way using the balance sheet. So disclaimer pala, it doesn't apply all the time so that we still need to further analyze the transaction. So I'll just give you some tips on how to identify which is the operating, which is investing, and which is financing. So in the financial statement, we have the current asset and current liability, right? The current asset and current liability, most of the account here came from or has operating activity. Tama? Most of the current asset and current liability is within or yung account related in the current asset and current liability are all related to operating activities such as accounts receivable, trade payables, prepayments, and accruals. So next is the non-current asset, which is under the long-term or the investing activities, which kasi diba, most of the non-current assets are PPEs or are long-term assets. And for financing naman, we have non-current liabilities such as long-term loans, transaction, and also the equity and capital, which is under financing. So, ayan nga, disclaimer, it doesn't apply all the time. So that's we still need to further analyze the nature of cash in and out transaction, whether it is operating, investing, and financing. Okay. So let's go to operating muna. So in operating, we have an option. Actually, the standard provide us the option to present it whether it indirect or direct method. So under direct method, the direct method shows the major cash receipts and cash payment transaction under directly. So in the cash flow direct method, cash receipt agad yung nakalagay dito and cash payments. I'm not sure if you've already saw a statement or statement of cash flow with this kind of format, since majority of the companies using the indirect method or most of the time called as the accrual basis. So which begins from the net profit loss or income and add and deduct the non-cash transactions. So from like depreciation, impairment, ano pa ba? The forex, unrealized forex gain or losses, the increase in and decrease in capital or working capital, which is under the current asset and current liability side, the inventory is receivable, trade payable, and so on. So both method are actually acceptable under the standard. It depends na lang how or what are the company's preference. If the company's preference is direct method, it's okay. So if direct, it's also okay. So wala namang problema whether as long as the information that you put in the cash flow should be always cash only, so cash basis only. So let's go back to what we discussed earlier in relation to um, other like sa financing. So if there is a subsidiary or disposal of business unit, all of the subsidiary and business units should be under the investing. Baka kasi yung iba is i-direct siya sa financing activity which is under the capital of the company, but actually it should be under the investing. So for the company which has a subsidiary and business unit under their company, any disposal on the subsidiaries and business units should be directed to investing activity or invest. So also a reminder, we should present interest, dividend, and income taxes separately. So for interest and dividends, it depends on for example, for interest, we can include it in the operating financing or even in equity as long as we can clearly identify if it is related to those activities. Same with income taxes. When taxes are, or if you can allocate or all the cash flows in relation to operating, investing, and financing, there is no problem with that as long as you can allocate the income taxes paid for each of the activities. Then exclude the non-cash transaction. Of course, this is cash flow. So dapat wala naman talagang non-cash transactions like reclassification of accounts and changes or mostly transfer of asset or asset classifications. So yun, for example, you transfer the work in progress to PPE. As you can see, there is an additional, or we have an additional long-term asset on that, diba? Additional, but it's not an acquisition, it's just a transfer. So there is no cash transaction on that activity. So hindi dapat siya makita sa statement of cash flow. Kasi before pa, nalagay mo na yan the investment in work in progress, di ba? During noong ginagawa or nag-account ka ng work in progress. So dapat hindi na siya makita. Also under full FRS pala, we have, I think, I everyone should already know this since this is a disclosure initiative presented even last 2018 pa yata, 2017. This is only for full PFRS, the disclosure initiative under financing activities. So this is to evaluate the changes and liability arising from financing activities. So here are the example of the disclosure initiative that we should disclose in the financial statement. We can tag is as a recon of liabilities from financing liabilities. So this change, this recon statement, this should show the changes of liability arising from financing activity causes by changes in cash flow, for example, foreign exchange rate or fair value of assets. So the statement or the note should show the recon of opening balances of the liability arising and closing balances of the liability arising from financing activity. This should show the cash flow and non-cash changes, cash and cash non-changes of a specific liability account. Like for this example, the bank borrowing, advances from related party, and interest payable. So this amount should be crossed or tied up to the beginning balances or beginning balances of bank borrowing. And this amount should tied up on the what you disclose in the cash flow under the statement of cash flow. Then the ending period or the September or the ending period of the current reconciliation should tally on the ending balance shown in the statement of financial position. So dapat magko-cross refer ito sa statement of financial position. You can also search the ifrs.org this disclosure in relation to disclosure initiative IAS under IAS 7. So here are the sample of cash flows. So as you using indirect method. So as you can see, we start with profit before tax or loss before tax, then add or deduct the non-cash income and expense such as depreciations, interest income, reversal of security deposit and financial instruments, and adjust the gains on losses on or changes in working capital for all current asset and current liability except also the notes payable and dividends payable. So for investing naman includes the purchasing and selling of long-term asset and marketable securities as well as if there is a collection of loans. So in the cash flow from financing activities, which includes the buyback of capital if there is, as well as the borrowing and repayment of short-term and long-term loans. And under this area then we can declare or show the dividends paid during the year, sum up the result of three activities to determine the net change and cash balance, and add the beginning balance to end up with the ending cash balance. Some of the company include the effect of changes in rate or changes on rate applicable to cash kasi there are balances or effect on balances that which is different from the account. For example, in this scenario, if your company has a forex exchange or meron siyang unrealized foreign exchange loss. As you can see here, we have unrealized foreign exchange loss na 3 million, but the effect on cash is much lower or much lower than declared. It is because this is the only effect based on the cash balance as per forex transactions or forex bank balance of the company. So ibig sabihin, the rest of the balances, the difference from the unrealized should be directed not on the effect on cash but instead effect of whether it is receivable or payable. Okay? Take note of that, especially when you have a transaction with unrealized foreign exchange gain or loss. We should separate that unrealized changes related to AR, related to AP, and related to cash. Hindi siya yung kung magkano yung inilagay mo dito, yun din yung ilalagay mo dito sa effect of changes on exchange rate para magbalanse lang siya. Mali yun. So we should identify what is related to receivable and what is related to accounts payable. There's a possibility kasi that this company has a foreign transactions. So they bill the company or their clients using dollar account. So the receivable is in dollar. So there is a change difference at the end of the period, and that difference should reflect or included in the receivable or payable. Okay? Take note of that in computation and in computing the cash flow as well as in wala dito wala dito. But another is the accounts related to long term. We should exclude the long term borrowings, which is under financing. We should identify how much is the interest paid and how much is the loan, how much is the payment related to loan only, to the principal payment. We should separately disclose in this cash flow from financing activity. So yung interest paid to uh, to long-term borrowing should be separated. Okay. There are times kasi that they bulk into one single item lang, or one item lang na ang nilalagay lang nila is loan payment to long-term loans. So which yung nasa loob pala nun is mayroon siyang interest payments, hindi siya tinatanggal. So as 'di ba we've discussed kanina that interest payments should be separately disclosed in the activities, in each of the activities. So we should exclude the interest payment doon sa loan payment kasi magkaiba siya. Okay? So next po. Okay ba? So ayan. So to add it up, so para makuha natin yung ending balance. Ayan yung ending balance. So i-add lang natin dito from net hanggang dito. Okay. So how to prepare financial statement cash flow. So in this process, as we discussed na already, so we have to analyze the transaction. Analyzation of transaction in terms of cash flow is really important, and identifying which is related to operating, investing, and financing to come up with the ending cash balance. So it is really important to identify what is under investing, what is under financing, and what is under operating cash flows. So, yun. So next. So notes to financial statements. So I think before we go to the notes to for the notes to financial statement, we will be discussing lang all the do's and don'ts as per based on the regulations. For example, we have the SEC memorandum circular. These are the do's and don'ts na in preparing the financial statements. So we have material deficiencies in in SEC Memorandum Circular number 8-2009. There are items that are considered materially deficient. So kailan siya magiging materially deficient ang isang financial statement? So if there is non-submission, non-compliant, not signed by the prescribed signatory, no accounting policy, and does not provide or the required disclosure based on SRC Rule 68 is not provided in the financial statement. And there is also noted 5 minor deficiencies by the commission. So yun. We will discuss this one by one. But for the prescribed signatories, who are the prescribed signatories ba? Ilan? So we have we have three prescribed signatories. The chairman of the board, the CEO, and the financial officer, or any person holding equivalent position as described doon sa BOD, executive, or finance officer. So, pero yung tatlo na yon, ang at least at minimum, we should accomplish one. And the one should be the CFO. Take note na CFO or yung sa finance is always sign the management responsibility. So for the two, the chairman of the board and CEO, the chief executive, pwedeng sila, kahit isa lang sa kanila, acceptable na. Pero better kasi, especially for for listed companies, or for yung mga malalaking companies, they require three: the chairman of the board, executive officer, and the finance officer. Okay? In case naman for branch or regional operation headquarters, which is, I think may mga client tayong ganito, yung mga branch offices and regional, yung SMR nila, which is yung mga headquarters is nasa foreign, is a foreign corporations. So yung mga SMR nila should be signed by a local manager who is in charge sa operation within the Philippines. So okay lang na local manager lang yung mag-sign for their SMR. For branch lang tsaka regional operating headquarters. Okay? So let's discuss the other. I think it's clear na for bullet point number 3. But for the other, I think we should discuss it further. So for the non-submission on any of the required FS compilation. So non-submission of any of this is already considered as materially deficient. So remember, statement of management responsibility and auditor's report is really important if kapag magsisend tayo or receive tayo ng financial statement, aside from those unstated above. Of course, ito naman talagang dun ito dapat sa financial statement. Ito kasi sometimes siya separate report by the management and of course by the auditor. So, yun. Next. There is no accounting policy for significant accounts. So when we will say significant yung account, actually doon sa memorandum na rin, meron silang provide na threshold. Threshold for this kind of companies such as listed, public companies, mutual fund, and other issuer, public and pre-need companies is 5%, and for all other companies that is not included in the 5% is 10%. So what is the basis of 10%? Ito siya. 10% of this FS line item. So for example, your total current asset is 1 million. Total current asset is 1 million. And you are under this threshold or companies. So the 10% of 1 million is 100,000. Any amount within the FS, within the current asset that is above 100,000 is considered significant. If the account is significant, it requires accounting policy, which is the accounting policy should be disclosed in the notes of financial statement. Diba, in the notes to financial statement, we have there a separate note for accounting policies, significant accounting policies. Yes. So doon natin ilalagay lahat ng significant accounting policy for significant accounts. So okay, clear tayo doon ah. So if non-current, sa non-current, total non-current asset tayo magbe-base. As well as for P&L account naman, so gross income, COS, total OPEX. So for the total OPEX, remember that for total OPEX, ensure that your others, minsan kasi doon sa mga P&L accounts, especially on the G&A and cost, we have others item at the bottom of the table, right? Those OPEX shouldn't be exceeds the threshold. There's no rule naman for that. We should ano lang yun, to minimize the exposure in terms of or for the SEC NBIR to at least to identify. Kasi kung halimbawa sobrang laki nung sobrang laki nung others mo or miscellaneous expenses mo aside from your normal general operating expenses, 'di ba, nakakaduda na siya. So better or kung talagang malaki siya, if there's a way to segregate it on a separate line item, better do it or provide a specific note or disclosure under the OPEX note or the cost and expense note in relation or the nature of the OPEX, what it pertains or doon sa miscellaneous income. So dapat i-disclose natin ano yung nature niya, kung ano yung saan siya nagpe-pertain, ano yung pertaining amount doon. Okay. So importante ito. So we should always look at this, yung mga threshold for us for the company, for those auditors, for you should always check this for the company to at least aware sila na dapat may accounting policy na ito, and for those accountants you should aware na we have a limit na siniset, and if an account exceeds that limit, so mag-aano siya, it requires further disclosure. Okay. So next is ano ba yung next? So there is noted 5 more minor deficiencies. So ano yung mga minor deficiency na nako-consider or nakikita ni company? As you remember, kahapon may present sa part nung kay Ira na presentation in relation to the deficiencies. So those are minor deficiencies. Any exceeded or if it's considered as deficient and mag-exceed siya sa 5 or nag-5 siya, yung FS na yun magiging materially deficient na. Okay? So ano yung mga noted deficiency or minor deficiency? So we have here the financial statement are not presented in a prescribed comparative format. So kanina 'di ba discuss natin what the comparative balance, how comparative balance is important for every statement, and if there is no and if it's not comparable, we should disclose such reason kung bakit siya hindi comparable. Diba? Next is there is no distinct between the current and non-current. So, yun nga, like yung kanina yung sinabi ko, there is no distinction. So, there should always be a distinction between the current and non-current portion for asset and liability, except in case allowed by PAS. So yun nga, except inallow siya ng PAS, like yung sa liquidity approach. Pero on a Philippine setting, there should be a distinction between the current and non-current. no cross-reference to the notes. So, di ba, diniscuss din natin kanina the importance of the notes referencing or cross-referencing on the note for the guidance of the user. It is also a requirement for in the SEC memorandum circular. So, of course, nandyan din yung number of disclosure not provided in the item considered as significant account. So, it shouldn't be exceed to 2. So, any account na hindi siya prinovidean, any significant account na hindi prinovidean na accounting policy na nag-exceed sa 2, considered minor deficiency na siya agad. And if it's more than, it will count as 1 doon sa noted or count as 2. So, every 2 items does not exceed 2. Every T o doon sa ika-third, it's a 1, count 1, minor deficiency. So, pag nag-exceed ka, halimbawa, naka-6 ka na, so material deficient na yung ano mo, yung FS mo on that note pa lang. Sa ano pa lang yun, sa disclosure pa lang, sa accounting policy disclosure pa lang. Paano ng iba? What if hindi ka nag-cross-referred? So, no cross-referencing kang ginawa. The statement of management responsibility is not full conformity with the subscribed wording under SEC rule. The statement of management responsibility kasi, we have a format noon. It is revised last 2018, as I remember, it is revised. So, you can check it further sa under SEC Rule 68 or SRC Rule 68 for the updated one, the Statement of Management Responsibility. So, if hindi siya in full conformity with the prescribed wordings, another minor deficiency. And such other deficiency as the commission may consider minor. So for example, yung mga nakita kahapon yung pinresent sa inyo, yun yung mga other than inilagay dito na deficiency na nakita ng commission during the review of the FS. So, kailan naman siya magiging materially misstated? So, we've already discussed the material deficiency, the deficiency ng FS. If dito naman, we will discuss the material misstatement. So, yung mga misstated information. So, first is the accounting policy on significant account is not consistent with PFRS and not consistently apply from period to period. So ina-align din ito doon sa comparative balances na diniscuss natin kanina. It's not always on the balances, but also all the accounting policy should also be consistently applied from period to period. If there is a changes, for example, there's an adoption of policy from year 1 to year 2, dapat naka-explicit na mayroong changes or we've used this kind of policy for year 1, for example, for 2019, but we use this kind of policy for year 2 para at least ini-explain natin na mayroong hindi consistent sa pag-apply ng policy, pero ito yung nilagay namin based on standard din naman siya. Nagkaroon lang ng transition. Like yung transition note ng PFRS 9 na ginawa and as well as PFRS 15 sa revenue. So, yung transition na yun, we should disclose the difference from year to year. The estimate or assumption used on significant account is unreasonable and resulted to a material misstatement. So, statement or assumption kasi ginagamit natin siya on the accounts or item that for example, if there's an impairment. But if the statement of and assumption disclosed in the estimates is not or is unreasonable, it is ground for material misstatement, especially kapag sobrang um, hindi siya nag-a-align na doon sa accounting policy or even on the standard. May sariling assumption si company that yun yung dinisclose din natin sa financial statement. So it's ground for material misstatements. There is more than one minor misstatement, and the aggregate amount involved the misstatement that meets the test of materiality. So materiality comes from the threshold that we've used a while ago, yung the significant. Next is the corporation with subsidiaries are not presented in or on a consolidated basis as required by the standard. So this is in relation to subsidiaries. If a company is reporting on a consolidated figure, for example, group consolidation na siya, and it is the corporation with subsidiary, hindi siya nakapresent as consolidated, misstated yung financial statement. So, and also other misstatement in the financial statement that commission may consider material. So generally, notes should be presented in a systematic manner. So present information about the basis of preparation of financial statement and specific accounting policy use should be present. And the disclosure, or we should disclose any information required by the IFRS that is not presented elsewhere in the financial statement. Also, we should provide additional information if there is that is not presented elsewhere in the financial statement, but it is relevant to the understanding of any of them or any of the user. For example, the contingent liability or unrecognized contractual commitments. For example, doon sa mga contractual commitments, yung mga projects, for example, sa construction, you have a project, may mga project kayo, special project or ongoing project, or meron kayong patapos and meron kayong committed project. So we have to disclose those information in the financial statement na wala siya, 'di ba yung mga projects naman wala naman siya sa numbers or wala naman siya sa books natin. So other informations that will help the user understand the company or makaka-improve ng understanding ng stakeholder should be included in the other disclosures. Ano pa yung mga other disclosure, like yung current situation natin ng COVID. So this is a significant event, right? So we should include it as significant event in the financial statement. So what to disclose in the significant event? Of course, the event, the COVID. And we should also disclose the effect of those in the financial statement as a whole. If ever nagkaroon siya ng effect on the financial statement, we should disclose it. And if the management assess that this that the situation will affect them in the future financially, so we should also disclose in the significant event doon. So, yun. I think for audit, we have a suggestion in the company in relation to disclosure regarding this significant event. You can, for the other team po, you can check on that for reference for your company. So, ayan. Ano pa yung mga yung mga other or mga significant transactions you can include din. I think na-discuss din kahapon yung mga significant after the reporting period na mga event but before the reporting date na dapat ma-disclose in the financial statement. Lahat ng yun dapat i-disclose din natin sa financial statement. Okay? So, key points lang. So, in preparing the financial statement, we should ensure the consistency of wordings in the financial statements. And of course, when using, for example, the notes here, so dapat consistent din siya and nagko-cross-refer siya. Also, in speaking of consistency, when we use yung mga words like reporting period and reporting date, for example, we use reporting period, we should use reporting period for the rest of the financial statement, yung reporting period. Baka kasi merong ginawa tayo reporting date. So magkaiba na siya. Dapat kung ano yung ginamit natin na una, yun din yung gagamitin natin to avoid confusion. Isa pa yung word na rental income sa rent income. So kung rental income yung ginamit natin sa policy, for example sa accounting policy, even sa notes to financial statements or doon sa notes disclosure under per account, rental income yung gagamitin natin. Isa pa, yung another example is as at and as of. Same siya, pero magkaiba siya ng word, pero iisa yung pinapatukuyan niya, 'di ba? So as at, if we use as at the face of the financial statement for the rest of the notes to financial statement hanggang dun sa mga notes per account, ang gagamitan natin is as at or as of kung ano yung una nating ginamit. So always ensure the correct footing, cross-referencing, and also yung kung ano yung ginamit natin na word, yun din dapat yung exact word na nandoon sa notes. In disclosing or preparing disclosures, make it simple. Don't use highfalutin words like this one. If you read this, the the mall spaces that its rent from related party were subleased by the company to related party tenants. Medyo magulo siya, 'di ba? Whereas, if you use this, the company subleased to third-party tenant small spaces that it rents from a related party. 'Di ba mas clear siya? Mas clear yung isa kaysa dito sa isa. So, make sure that it is simple and hindi siya paikot-ikot yung salita, uulitin ulit natin, ganun. So, simple as always. And kung ano lang yung kailangan as required by the standard, the measurement, subsequent measurement, and the recognition, yun lang yung ilagay natin. Huwag na tayo magkwento pa ng hindi naman kailangan. Okay. So next, what to disclose. So first, I think we have to go to first muna sa general disclosure, which is hindi naman ito na-discuss on the yesterday. So corporate information. So ano yung mga kailangan na nakalagay sa corporate information? Of course, we have to include the domicile and the country of incorporation and its registered office, as well as the nature of entities and operation, and the authorized for issue, date of authorized for issue financial statement. We also have to disclose if there is a going concern issue. So, yun. Kailan ba yung company is capital deficient? If the company kasi naging capital deficient na, the company should disclose material uncertainty doon sa paragraph on its general information and should discuss the concrete plan to address the condition. Okay? So, here is the example of a company, corporate information. So, balikan natin yung kanina, yung domicile, di ba? Need natin yung kailangan i-disclose, alin yung mga kailangan i-disclose? Yung domicile ng corporation, di ba? Which is, and its registered office, tapos kung saan siya naka-incorporate. So, incorporated with Philippine SEC and registered principal place of business is here, nandito. And andito yung legal name niya, legal form name. Then the next one is the purpose or nature of the entity's operation. So primary purpose, we disclose that. So I think you can you can use the articles of incorporation para makuha itong dalawa na to. And next is the authorized for issue date. And ito yung sample ng going concern if the company has a going concern issue. So if the company has going concern or has a capital deficiency, we have to disclose going concern paragraph in relation as well as the plan. So as you can see here, meron silang management plan to boost their operations. Also, you can also include any information for the understanding of the user, especially kapag halimbawa meron silang secondary license or katulad nito under PESA siya. We should disclose you on the general information. Baka kasi hindi tayo mag-provide, 'di ba? For example, under ITH pala siya, so wala siyang tax. Tapos hindi natin dineclare sa general information, exposure agad 'yon. May expose agad yung company. So take note of those items. Okay? So general disclosure to continue. So notes are normally in sequence as ito. Should first the basis of preparation, summary of significant accounting policy, supporting information for items in the financial statement, as well as other disclosures. So basis of preparation, dito, nakapaloob dito yung compliance natin, kung ano yung ginagamit natin na framework. Basis of measurement, functional and presentation currency. So ano yung functional and presentation currency ng company. So here are the example of basis for preparation. So as you can see here, ABC Philippines, under saan siya na framework, basis of preparation. So under SME, and it has been prepared, yung measurement basis niya, historical cost conversion, except as disclosed in the accounting policies below. So nag-disclaim siya na unless it is explicitly disclosed in the accounting policy, the measurement is an historical cost conversion convention. Convention? Mali po ito. Conversion po. So, ayan. So, next is the significant accounting policy. So, summary of significant accounting policies and judgment. So, for summary of accounting policy, make sure that your accounting policy always include the measurement basis, the initial and subsequent measurement, of course, as well as the disposal and the recognition. Importante po yun for disclosing the accounting policy. Next is the judgment. This includes the estimation that the management had made in the process of applying accounting policy, which has most significant effect in the amounts recognized in the financial statements. So, judgment is also important, especially like under PFRS 9, for example. Under PFRS 9, in determining the fair value through profit or loss and ACI, and as well as determining what kind of financial instrument or classification of financial instrument, it requires judgment to identify the class of financial instrument. So we have to disclose what kind of estimation or judgment yung in-apply natin doon sa particular standard na yon. Okay? So, on estimates naman, this is the key assumption on how we compute and arrive on a particular amount. For example, in trade and other receivables for allowances, now we call that as expected credit losses on the new accounting standard under IFRS 9. So when we compute expected credit loss, we use assumptions, the historical rates, the historical data, and other assumption and factors to arrive us to the possible expected credit losses of the company. So those assumptions na ginamit natin, whether it is historical or predetermined assumption, we have to disclose it in the estimates. So we should disclose yung mga assumptions na ginawa natin. So as well as we have to disclose in detail the nature and the carrying amount at the end of the period. So this is the example of judgment, like those of financial instrument kanina. So we use evaluation, ayan, kung mapapansin nyo. And next is we use, for example, sa estimates naman. So, andito yung key assumption niya. Ito. And dinidisclose din nila yung carrying value noong receivable. And kung merong if the management assessment naman has no impairment, but ilalagay din natin. Take note that we should explicitly disclose if there is no impairment recognition identify in the in some of the estimate. For example, kasi mostly ang mga estimates kasi is ayan, one is the impairment, next is the PPE, yung estimation sa depreciation, right? So ayun, ano pa, intangibles. Yan. Okay. So next. So now we've done sa memorandum circular. Now let's go to revenue regulations. So RR 15-2010. I think most of you are familiar with this since ito yung pinaka-last na kailangang kinokompleto ng management, especially ng accounting. and ensure that it is aligned um, with the books. So, ano yung mga required information for in disclosing doon sa RR? Ito yung supplementary information sa latter part of the financial statement. Okay. And also, this is this is also included in the um, auditor's report. So, yung RR 15, tinetestify natin na tama yung information na nakalagay doon sa RR 15-2020 company. Kaya talagang kasama din siya sa pag-audit natin, tama? For the auditors and for the other po sa account for the other teams, we ensure that all the required information is aligned with the returns that we submitted on the regulatory versus the books or our records, tama? So first, ano ba yung kailangan na information na i-declare natin sa supplementary? Output VAT. So output VAT is the amount of output VAT declared during the year should be disclosed. Also, if there is a zero-rated sale or receipt or the like should be disclosed also. And feel free to include or put disclosure that will improve the understanding of the amount indicated in the supplementary and within the financial statement. So as you can see in the example here, dinideclare nila um, kung magkano yung output VAT in relation to VAT exempt and tax vatable sales to arrive with the total output VAT for the period. They also disclose here the revenue if there is a recon items on the revenue. For example, here it says that revenue includes accrued income from rental due to straight lining amounting to this amount. So, ginagawa kasi ito dahil there are times that the output VAT, if you gross up the output VAT declared versus the sale, na dineclare natin sa financial statement, hindi siya nagtutugma. Tama? Which is basically dapat magtugma siya. Okay? Next. Input VAT. So, sa input VAT naman, dinidisclose natin yung beginning, current year domestic purchases or payments, whether it is for resale or manufacture, and capital goods, pwede din natin, i-declare din natin dyan yung mga capital goods and services na na-incur natin. And also, yung mga claims like yung output VAT nga to arrive to the ending balance of input VAT. Take note that the beginning balance and the ending balance should be equal to what is declared in the financial statement. So dapat nagtatali siya sa nasa prepayments natin or other current assets. Right? Kasi 'di ba dinideclare natin ito sa books. So dapat anything from beginning, which is the comparative amount of the period, as well as the ending should be equal to the amounts that is declared in the financial statement. If hindi siya tugma, dun pa lang, may exposure na agad tayo. Okay? So next, landed costs. So this included sa landed cost yung mga custom duties and tariff paid na binayaran natin or accrueds. And any amount paid using the excise tax, whether it is locally or important, regardless of the items that we buy or sold, as long as it is excisable, we should disclose it. So under DST naman, all forms of DST loans, loan instrument, share of stocks. So here also is another example for disclosures. For ano, you can use a tabular if there is too many DST to declare. You can use a tabular instead of a paragraph form. It's up to you as long as these items are included. So next is the withholding taxes or withholding tax in relation to compensation, creditable, and final withholding tax, whether paid or accrued. We should disclose it, and if also take note if for example if on the accrued, if though hindi naman ito nakikita sa financial statement, make sure lang na nagtatali ito sa books natin as well as doon, especially doon sa doon sa accrued, tali siya doon sa books natin. And all other taxes that is lodged in the taxes and licenses, whether it is under cost or general and admin. 'Di ba we have taxes and licenses sa general and admin natin or COS, kung alin man doon, any taxes doon should be equal or we should declare all the transactions kung ano yung ginawa na or ano yung naandun sa loob ng taxes and licenses natin. And of course, this should be equal or tallied doon sa amount or doon sa current amount ng taxes and licenses na nandun sa notes. Okay. So I hope you understand the importance of cross-referencing and tying up of amounts, which is really important, especially dito sa RR. And of course, if there is a cash tax, a deficiency tax assessment as well as tax cases, take note that we should disclose this particular. Ito yung tamang disclosure for tax assessment in case there is no outstanding tax deficiency. Always include this part. Itong part na to, lagi dapat itong naandun. There are times kasi na nawala ito sa sa disclosure and na-call up siya ni BIR. So, yon. Remember na itong lahat na to kasi are very important. This information is very important. Yung in-state kasi natin dito sa RR is the first information that the assessor, or for example for BIR, ito yung una nilang pupuntahan then they go backwards on your returns, go backwards on your financial statements, and that is the time you will realize makaka-receive ka na ng tax assessment kasi hindi nagtutugma lahat ng information na meron ka or na i-provide mo sa BIR. So that is also one of the reason why we have or most of the assessment of BIR came from BAT kasi dinideclare natin siya, tapos si BIR din-check siya dun sa return natin. So kapag hindi siya tugma, ayun, may deficiency siya agad. So magkakaroon ng tax assessment. Okay, so take note of this 9 item. If there is no item, or if, for example, your company don't have any one of this, just put pa rin yung, for example, input BAT, tapos i-declare nyo no output BAT for the period or no input BAT for the period. Even the landed cost, i-declare nyo na wala. So, it is important that we declare na wala kasi this is these items are the required is under the RR to disclose under RR 15-2020. Ilagay pa rin natin yung item na ito, then isub natin dun sa ilalim na walang ganitong transaction during the year. Okay? So other key points, when you were presenting under the BS accounts, Always use the liquidity approach. And in operating expenses naman or the income statement accounts, use the TPO approach, which is kung ano yung pinakamataas. TPO means to put in order. So ano yung pinakamataas? Make sure siya yung nasa first row. Take note lang na for the others, lagi siyang nasa baba before the total. Okay? So the liquidity, this is not there is no rule for this, but for the for clear and understanding lang ng user para mas mabilis nila makita. Better na nakaganit siya. Mas malinis na rin kasi. Okay? Next.
Kami na nadya lang dito sa atin magpakalat.
So, friendly reminder. Always check the grammar, format, and alignment. Excuse me, sorry. Sino yun? Yan. Always check the grammar, format, and alignments. Note referencing, rolling of numbers. Rolling of numbers meaning nagro-roll yung numbers. For example, beginning balance hanggang dun sa ending balance, magro-roll siya. For example, when you do the PPE, diba? In the PPE table, you will declare the beginning balances and the movements. So from beginning balances, dapat tumutugma siya doon sa beginning balances or doon sa ending balance ng prior period. As well as the movement, dapat nagko-cross-refer naman siya sa lahat ng transaction within the financial statements such as cash flows, expenses, sa depreciation expense, and as well as yung sa accumulated changes. Pati doon sa cash flow if there is a long-term disposal and this long-term acquisitions. Okay, rolling of numbers. As well as the ending. So, dapat nagko-cross-refer siya. Ayun, agreements of amount within the financial statements. Okay? I think that's all for now. Thank you for listening. For your questions, you can email me, and you can also search the references under this websites aside from SAP Archive also. So, ayan. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.